Welcome, my friend. You are listening to Read Clean YA with CJ, the podcast for teens and young adults who want to explore exciting worlds, deep themes, and epic stories without the objectionable content. I'm your host, award-winning author CJ Malacy, and in this episode, we are going to dive into an author interview with my good friend and fellow young adult author, Candace Kade. Author of the incredible young adult sci-fi novel Enhanced, Candace Kade is also a recovering overachiever who spends her time dreaming up stories typically involving tech, psychology, culture, and sometimes swords. She's a certified Krav Maga assistant instructor and loves writing action-packed martial arts scenes. A third culture kid, she considers Chengdu and Austin to be her homes. When she's not exploring new countries, she enjoys hiking in national parks, moving, again, teaching her husband Mandarin, and keeping a baby human alive. She can be bribed with boba tea, fluffy puppies, and breakfast tacos. Candace, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited to have you today for two reasons. One, I love Enhanced. It is such a great story. And two, I just love that I get to talk with you since we are friends. So it's just an extra bonus benefit that it's getting to interview one of my own friends for this show. So I'm looking forward to our conversation today. Before we dive into it, though, could you just do a little definition of what it means to be a third culture kid for anyone who doesn't know?
Sure. So a third culture kid is someone who has grown up in a culture other than their passport culture. So, for example, for me, I was born in the US, so I'm technically an American citizen. But at the age of 4, my family moved to China, and that's where I pretty much grew up until 18. So, growing up in a culture that is not your passport country for the majority of your developmental years makes you a third culture kid. And it can take on a variety of different forms and factors, but for me, that's what my experience was as a third culture kid.
Awesome. Thank you so much for explaining and for sharing that. I'm excited to talk about your story. And could you just give us a little synopsis of what it's about without any spoilers? Because people need to just experience the twists and turns of your book without any spoilers.
Absolutely. No spoilers. I love surprising people along the way, so I won't do that. So it's a young adult sci-fi novel, first in the Hybrid series, and it's set in the Asian Federation in the year 2123, where everyone has genetic enhancements, at least everyone who can afford them. And so in this world, society is really split sharply between those who have these incredible enhancements, which are sort of like superpowers. You know, some people can breathe underwater, some people have enhanced intelligence, or they're supersized and have this amazing strength. And then you have those who are born naturally and they live in the outskirts where there's pollution. The only jobs left are really AI training jobs. There's a lot of violence and crime, and they're really at a disadvantage at life. And our story follows Lee Urban, who was born naturally, but then is adopted into the high society of the enhanced and has to hide her lack of enhancements, which of course gets harder as she enrolls in Peking University, which is the most prestigious school for the enhanced elite. So there's a lot of fun hiding and figuring out who she can trust. There's mysterious hackers, there's futuristic motorcycle races, AI games. But ultimately, it's a story about a girl finding herself in a society where really your DNA determines everything.
That was such a great description, and everything you were describing just was bringing me back into the story, which it's such an immersive world. You did a great job just bringing me as the reader into this place where people have enhancements, and you just start assuming everyone does. It was hard to put the book down and go back to a life with unenhanced people because it was such a absorbing world. So I love that. And you already kind of touched on this a little bit, but what is like a deeper theme in this story that got woven in, whether you did it intentionally or you found it later as you were looking back on the book and doing edits and everything?
Yeah, I would say the deeper themes are really more about home, culture, and identity. And I think those are really important themes. For me personally, having grown up in China, I struggled a lot with that I went to a local Chinese school part-time and then I was homeschooled part-time. And so for most of my life growing up in China, I felt like I should belong there. But obviously I didn't because I don't look Chinese, and people always knew like, oh, she's a foreigner. Even though I spoke the local language, I did everything that the locals did, but I never quite fit in because I looked different. And that was always very challenging. And then when I came back to the US for college at 18, it was also very challenging for me because I hadn't grown up in the US. And so even though I spoke English and my parents did a good job of educating us, like, here's the Pledge of Allegiance. I remember memorizing that in third grade, like, I'm about to go to public school. How do I say the Pledge of, just basic things that like most people take for granted. I had to sit down and learn. And there were just a lot of things that still fell through the gaps and I just didn't know. And I felt like I didn't fit in the US, even though this is my passport country. This is technically where I was from, but I hadn't lived here. And so I think I wrestled a lot with themes of culture and which culture do I belong to and who am I? Am I Chinese? Am I American? Am I neither? Where do I belong? And so I think this theme of belonging and culture and home are very important themes to me personally. And so they're themes that you see throughout the hybrid trilogy, but in Enhanced as well.
Something that I was born and raised in America, in the same part of America, so it's harder to envision. But then I think one of the neat things about Story is that now I can like enter into Urban's life and see the world through her eyes and imagine, just even for a moment, catch a glimpse of what that must have been like for you living that way, like feeling, wait, do I fit here? How do I fit here? I should fit here, but I don't feel like I do. And I think even if you're not a third culture kid, I'm sure so many can resonate with that theme because we all in our hearts want to belong somewhere. And it's hard to fit in certain places. And I think we've all probably experienced that moment where you walk into the room and you feel like, this is not where I should be right now. And I want to fall through the cracks. And what do I do with that feeling? So I love that you tackled that because I don't know that we see it handled all the time in young adult fiction. So I just love how head on you hit that issue. And especially for other third culture kids, I'm sure this is like really resonant for them.
Yeah, it was such a fun issue to tackle. And I totally agree. Like, third culture kids have reached out and said, hey, I really resonate with this. But so have other people. We've all been in a place where we're the new person at a party or the new person on the block, and we feel lonely and we feel like, everyone's in this clique and they all know each other except me. And I'm just here awkwardly eating my nachos. Like, we've all been in situations like that. And so I think we can all, to a degree, resonate with just this feeling of being an outsider and wanting to belong, but just not getting that acceptance, or maybe getting that acceptance, but still putting it on ourselves and feeling like, oh, they're just faking it, or I don't actually belong. And I just think that feeling of belonging is so important to all of us, and all of us at some time have struggled with that.
Yeah, for sure. I can think of multiple times in my own life where that's been me. I've been that person with the nachos in the corner feeling like I should not be even in this corner. What am I doing here right now? So it is, and I think it's because we were created to belong, to fit somewhere. And so it's in every human being, like that longing for something where I know I have a purpose. I know I fit. I know I belong. And when we feel like that's not true, there's something I think deep within us that was like from in the fabric of our being that feels like something's off, until we figure out what that actually means and what that actually looks like for us. So it's an important theme. I really love that you're handling that. I love how you're tackling it. Have you found in the writing of the story and the series in general, have you found it to be therapeutic for you at all as you've dealt with this theme that's been such a personal one for you?
That's such a funny question that you asked that, because I think writing it, I was thinking, oh, these are like things I struggled with in high school, in college, even a little bit as a young adult. And here's my lessons learned. Like, I want to pass it on to people, not in a like preachy way, but here's some of the things that have helped me. But it's funny because when I had finished the book, I don't remember what it was that was happening in my life, but I remember as I was editing it, thinking, oh my gosh, this is the exact, like getting to a point in the book where, and I don't want to spoil things, but some of the things Urban was wrestling with and learning, I was like, this is me again. I'm back here. And so I think that's the thing too, is like our lives go in different phases and in different stages in our lives. Sometimes we wrestle with different themes. And so for me, I think I've wrestled with a lot of this theme of belonging at an earlier age, but there's still elements of it that come up. And so, yeah, I think it has been therapeutic, as I remember one day thinking, oh my gosh, these words I wrote a year ago are actually very helpful to me right now. I need to read these and apply these to my life again.
Yes, I love that. I feel like God can use stories in a therapeutic way as we craft them and as we read them. And because like I said earlier, I can read, enhance, and experience maybe just a tad bit of what you went through because it's a story that I can immerse myself in. So I learned something in a way that maybe us just having a conversation, I couldn't fully understand all that you experienced, but I can feel Urban's emotions pulsing through the story, which allows me to experience it deeper. And then when we write the stories too, I think sometimes we can, I, I don't know, sometimes for me, I write something down that I didn't even realize I was thinking, or I didn't, and like you said, later, a year later, you're like, oh, that fits still. I needed to read that. So it's just crazy how stories can be such an impactful part of our lives on both sides of the page.
Yeah, absolutely. And stories are different than most forms of media in that, unlike TikTok or Instagram, you're reading this book, you're with the main character for many hours. And so you have that chance to go deeper. That's so much different than most platforms. You really get to dive into those emotions and those themes and wrestle with them in a way that I think most other forms of, I guess, storytelling, you don't have the opportunity. But in writing books, you really get to go deeper and address those themes. And I love that.
Yes, I agree completely. So we've talked about this theme of belonging and how you wove that into your story. But when a reader closes the book, because we almost have talked more about like how this is a longing in us and we want to belong, and that's an important theme. So, but when the reader closes the book, is there something about that theme that you want them to take away from the story in a deeper way? Not just, oh, I want to belong too, but I don't know, does that come to a conclusion, or is there something, whether it's in this story or in the series, that you're hoping to convey to the reader?
I would say the first thing is I just want people to feel seen and heard. I think the thing about loneliness or feeling like an outsider is you feel like you're the only one and you feel like you're just isolated and alone. And so I don't want people to feel that way. I want people to recognize that there are other people like them and they're not alone in this journey. So I would say that's the first thing. And then the second thing is I think it's so tempting to equate belonging with what people say about us. So we try so hard, and I've struggled with this for much of my life of, trying to gain people's acceptance by looking like the culture around me. That's when you jump between cultures a lot. That's been very much a part of my life, is figuring out, okay, how do I look American now? Okay, now how do I look Chinese? How do I look like the people around me? How do I get their acceptance? And that's hard, but realizing, I don't need the people around me to have, to accept me for me to accept myself. And I think that's a hard lesson, is sometimes we just feel like, oh, it's the people around us that determine our worth, that determine whether we belong, that determine our acceptance. And it's really not. God created everyone in the world, and we all have worth and value and purpose because we reflect his image. And so we don't have to look to other people to find that acceptance. Like, we already have it. And so sometimes I think the hardest thing is just accepting ourselves because we already have been accepted. And so I would say that's the second piece, is just, not looking to other people necessarily for that acceptance, but realizing we already have it in the form of a God who created us, and therefore we can accept ourselves.
I love both parts of what you said, but specifically first, the second part. I love the point you brought out that God created each of us and we were made in his image. And I think he gave each of us a part of himself. He's a God who is bigger than we can comprehend. And each of us have something specific that we can reflect of his image. And it's something that only I can reflect, or only you can reflect. And if I'm trying to be you, or you're trying to be me, then we can't belong because we're not actually embracing who God made us to be and reflecting that part of his character that he wants us to reflect. And so it does leave us feeling lost because we're trying to be someone else. And God's like, no, no, I have a purpose for you individually. And I know, like, for me, I can remember when that truth started to become a bigger part of my life and how it changed my life, because I was very much not trying to be in a different culture because that wasn't my life. But for me, it was trying to be this friend or that friend or have that calling or this calling, and almost drum it up within myself rather than just be who God had made me to be. And it always left me feeling at a loss because I can't be Candace Kade, as cool as you are. I have to be me, you know? And so that is something that I think is so vital to learn. And I love that that's something that you're, even if it's not fully said in the pages, it's something that you've brought out in the story that we can learn in our own lives. Such a powerful truth.
Yeah, I just agree with that so much. I think so many people spend so much of their time trying to be like someone else or like what our society idolizes. We want to be prettier, stronger, faster, smarter, more successful, or like, whoever of our friends is like that, or whoever in the media that we admire. But the truth is, every single person has so much beauty and strength, and just them being uniquely who they are have so much worth. And so I love it when people embrace their own unique calling, their own unique identity, and they live that out. It's just so beautiful, and I love to see that.
Yes, I love that too. And can you remind me of the first thing you said? Because I had a thought and now I'm forgetting of that belonging package. You had like a first point and then that second point that we just discussed.
Oh, yes. So the first part was just I want people to see, I want them to feel seen and heard, and like they're not just an outsider or lonely on their own.
Okay, yes. And I think that is so vital, especially in a culture where everything is kind of social media is such a huge part of it, which we're not here to discuss the merits or the woes of social media, but I think that can definitely have an impact because we see all these other people and it can be so easy to feel unseen, like, oh, I didn't get as many likes, or no one cared about this post that I did, or whatever the case may be, and just to feel like I'm the only one who feels this way or like this. And I think when we realize in stories or when we're talking to people that, oh, other people feel that way too, it can break down some of those lies in our minds that I'm alone and no one else understands and no one else is like this. And when we start to realize, oh no, this is an actual thing others struggle with, we can start to overcome that because it's like, well, no, I don't think that way about them. So maybe it's not true about me too, which is, I think, a really powerful thing for our lives when we can break past that and realize, okay, God made me, I am seen, and I matter to other people around me, even if I don't feel like it in certain moments.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you go sit down to write a story, do you have a theme like this in your mind as you're writing, or do you have a story and then the theme kind of finds you later and you discover that this got woven in or something like that?
That's a good question. I think it depends on the book. I think for Enhanced, I had always had this, I don't think I even thought of it in terms of a theme. I think I just always had this sort of feeling of this tension between worlds of West and East and where do I belong that I knew I wanted to include in a book. But yeah, I don't think I ever thought of it. I sat down and thought, okay, this is the theme and it's about belonging. And eventually I did get to a point, in the revisions, the multiple edits, where I'm like, okay, we need to fine tune this a little bit. But I think when I started out, it wasn't, oh, I have this clear theme that I want to put in the book. I'm definitely more of I start with the plot and the world building. So I knew that I wanted to have a plot that centered around gene editing because it exists today in the form of CRISPR. Obviously, we are not that advanced. People cannot breathe underwater yet, unfortunately, or do a lot of these things that are semi-terrifying. But we are getting there. There are some gene editing things that are happening today on the scientific front that are crazy and, absolutely insane to look at. And so I knew I wanted to write something about that and just what that could look like in our world if people had the ability to get gene edits. But then I also knew, having grown up in China, that I always wanted to write something set loosely on Chinese culture. And I hadn't really seen any, at the time, I hadn't seen any sci fi or fantasy novels set loosely in China. Since then, I have seen some fantasy novels come out, but I hadn't seen any sci fi ones. And so, as I was thinking about this plot of gene editing, I was living in Beijing at the time, and I had put aside my fantasy novel and I wanted to write something new. And that's really when the idea came to me, what if I made this a sci-fi novel set in Asia, but with these gene editing abilities? Like, what would that look like? And so for me, it's definitely, I love world building. I love mind blowing plots. I love plot twists so much. So for me, I usually start there, and then the themes sometimes just kind of seep in naturally. Sometimes I think in the editing, especially, I have to sit down and really polish those themes. But yeah, I'm definitely a plot and world building person first.
I think that's why the theme flows so beautifully through your story, because it's not like you're preaching it, but it's woven into it. And I know that was through, I'm sure, countless hours of editing and rewrites, but it's done so well because the world is so real that you feel like this is a real person experiencing these real issues in it. And otherwise, it just feels like a paper world with this, paper doll character who we can't relate to because it's not real enough. So you've given such a deep world, which makes sense that would be the way you went. Do you have a favorite character in your story? Moving beyond the theme now.
Yeah. I think Coral is probably my favorite character. She, in this world where everyone cares so much about their social score or their soch, and they're all playing, these games to try and link with other people so they can boost their soch, and they don't want to offend anyone. And, they're all playing these games, but Coral just really isn't playing the game. She doesn't wear the latest trends. In fact, she seems to wear things that people don't like. She just doesn't care. So I really like her a lot. She's also she's a camo, so she has the ability, she has like chameleon abilities, so she can blend in with her surroundings. She's like on the sort of military spy track, so she's really good at climbing and escaping and hacking into things. So she's just a really fun character. So I probably really enjoy Coral.
Yeah, I loved her too. She's very, very. I didn't know what to do with her at first, but I loved her once I got to know her more. Very cool character. Are there things that you hide in your stories, which I kind of know the answer to this question anyway, but secrets that only you know, or Easter eggs or whatever, things that are hidden within the book or on the cover?
No, I'm glad that you asked because I love talking about it. And I don't actually think I've shared this on a podcast before. So you guys are the very first ones. So this is very exciting. But yeah, there are Easter eggs both on the cover and then also in the book as well. So on the cover, you'll notice there are two sets of characters, one on the left-hand side, or four characters, I should say, on the left-hand side. And those are actually a Chenyu, or a Chinese saying. And it says 水落石出, which means as the water begins to recede, the rocks begin to show. And it's really hinting at Urban's whole struggle with trying to fit in, but also hiding her identity, hiding her genetics, hiding the fact that she's a natural, and will the truth come to light eventually? So basically one of the themes of the book. And then on the right-hand side are the characters wushu, which means martial arts. One, because that plays a role in the book, and two, just because I love martial arts and obsessed, and anytime I can mention martial arts, I probably will. And then also inside the book, in the chapter headings, you'll notice there's two sets of characters. And at the beginning of the book, most of the book actually, they start with 自外, which means self, and then sort of outsider. So feeling, hinting at like not accepting yourself or feeling like an outsider. And then partially towards the end, those characters actually change to 自爱, which means like self-love or acceptance, hinting at Urban's journey throughout the book. And so, yeah, those are some of the big Easter eggs. There's also just little things in Mandarin. There's a lot of pinging in there that if you speak Mandarin, you might pick up on. If not, you probably won't. But yeah, there's a few smaller Easter eggs for anyone who's fluent in Mandarin as well.
I love that. I didn't know that about, I knew there were Easter eggs, but I didn't know the depth of them. And through the story, I love the chapter header thing. That's so cool.
Yeah,
Very
the
neat.
chapter header is so fun. Most people don't notice it because the first character stays the same, zuh, and so they don't even notice that the last character actually changes at the end of the book, which I thought was really fun.
Yes, that's fantastic. Has anybody caught that? Any of your readers, have they seen it?
I don't think anyone has reached out and been like, hey, this is strange. Why does it change at the end? I mean, I have told people, and so those people are like, oh, so cool. But I don't think anyone on their own has noticed it yet. So yeah, I would be curious. Yeah, we'll see if someone notices on their own someday.
That's such a neat thing. I'm glad you got to add that in. That's so cool.
Yeah,
Very
I'm
neat.
super grateful to my publisher because, yeah, the initial cover of Enhance, it was just random characters. I think it was like a noodle shop or a wedding shop or something. And so I begged the cover designer, can we please make these, characters significant? And then same for the typesetter. She asked me, she was like, hey, do you want to do anything with these characters? And I was like, hey, actually, can we change it halfway through? And she was super willing to work with me. So I'm very grateful to my publisher allowing me to work with my cover
Yes.
designer and typesetter to do that.
Yes. Now, as we kind of wrap things up, can you just share a little bit about you? So maybe something quirky or different, unique about yourself that not everyone might know from your bio or something fun facts about Candace.
Yeah, something quirky. I feel like I have so many quirky things about me. It's which one? I'll just rattle off a couple. We'll see which one's the most quirky. I enjoy brewing my own kombucha, making my own sourdough bread. I love Spartan races. One time I did two Spartan races back to back within like a week. I frequently still, even now, mispronounce many American words. My husband, probably on a bi weekly basis, has to correct some word that I've been saying my whole life. And then he'll be like, no, that's not how you say it. And I'm like, what? I've been saying it for so long. Are you kidding? No one corrected me. But I think people just either, you feel bad correcting someone, or they just think, oh, it's a one time thing. She just kind of slurred her vowels or whatever. And it's like, nope, definitely have been mispronouncing it. I realize I say
Oh my.
kindergarten. I've been saying it wrong like my whole life. It's kindergarten. My
Right.
husband's like, no, it's not kindergarten. There's a D in there. It's kindergarten. I was like, oh, okay. I mean, I know how to spell it. I don't. Yeah, pronunciation. I
Right.
still. Yeah. So there we go.
Those are so fun. I had no idea you brewed your own kombucha. That's so cool. I love kombucha. I've never even considered making it myself. How fun.
It's really
The-
fun, except when you have a snowpocalypse like we did in Texas. I think it was 2 years ago. And then you're supposed to keep the kombucha at like a general temperature. And of course, our house
right.
was freezing. And so after like 2 weeks later, when we finally had power again, I thought to open the kombucha outside because it just
Oh no.
exploded. I never found the cap again. It like went flying. I don't know where it went flying. The whole thing was just
Wow.
fizz. Like by the time it was done, there was nothing left. It was all fizz. It all went away. So all of them
That's
exploded. It
crazy.
was great. So if you do decide to brew kombucha, make sure that you're not going to have a snowpocalypse and that your house will always be the same temperature. And just to be safe, maybe always open them outside to make sure they didn't over ferment and they're not going to explode.
Oh my goodness, these are fun facts and tips for anyone who is considering brewing kombucha. I love it. Oh, and can you just let everyone know where they can find you online or social media?
Sure. So you can go to my website, CandaceKade.com. That's Candace, and Kade is spelled Kade. You can get book one anywhere on Amazon, anywhere books are sold. And then book two is currently available for pre order. So yeah, you can go to my website and you can get those. You can sign up for my newsletter. I'm also active on Instagram at Candace Kade Author.
Wonderful. And I will put all of those links in the show notes so people can grab them nice and easy and go read this fantastic book. I think you guys will all really enjoy it. Thank you, Candace, so much for coming on Read Clean YA with CJ. I loved having you, loved getting to have this conversation.
Thank you. I had so much fun as well. Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Candace Kade. Candace is a great friend and a wonderful author, and if you're looking for an exciting sci-fi read with an awesome story world, incredible tech, and some very cool Hunger Games type vibes, then Enhanced is for you. There are epic twists and turns, high stakes, and mysteries to be unraveled throughout this story, and Book 2, Hybrid, is also available for pre-order now. I do want to give a quick content warning for sensitive readers. As I mentioned, Enhanced has high life and death stakes, as well as a sweet romance. The violence isn't graphic, but there are some scary scenes and very bad guys that are worth noting if you or a younger friend or family member might be a little more sensitive to these things. And to coin a phrase from The Princess Bride, this is a kissing book. Nothing excessive, but as I mentioned, there is a romance in the story, so if you're not quite ready for that, it's something to be aware of. Candace Kade has also graciously agreed to include an early ebook advanced reader copy of Hybrid, Book 2 in the series, in this month's giveaway. So don't forget to check out the October giveaway for Read Clean YA with CJ and find her book along with some other great young adult novels. You can find the episode show notes at readcleanya.com. Next week, I'll be talking with YA author Jamie Foley, author of Emberhawk. If you're a lover of fantasy stories, then you're going to enjoy this interview and love the book. And even if fantasy isn't always your thing, you'll love hearing from Jamie. She's humble, sweet, and a lot of fun. Don't forget to tune in. Thank you so much for listening to Read Clean YA with CJ. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend so they can discover exciting, clean, young adult books too.